Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindie Chavez here. Today is Wednesday, October the 3rd, 2018, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, your second daily dose of happy for the day. And I'm happy to report that we're doing the podcast on time. The only thing I'm not happy about is the broadcast thing that was working this morning stopped working today. So I'll have to figure out what's going on with that after the show today. But I'm sure it'll all work out because, as Wendy Dillard likes to remind me, Cindie, everything is always working out for me, right?
Yes. I agree. I was going to say, yesterday morning, I will say, we often talk about the weather, right?
Absolutely.
Part of that is because our weather, my weather and your weather are so different.
Very different.
Yesterday morning, it's still in the 90s here. And yesterday morning when I woke up, actually to do the podcast, yesterday morning was why is the thermostat not working? Why is the air conditioning not working? Yeah, that's, it happens, and it's one of those things. And so I came in, did the podcast, and then called on someone to see about having someone come out and look at it. And the interesting thing was that I noticed about my thought process was as soon as I came in to make the call, I felt like my inner self said to me, this is all part of everything working out perfectly. And I said, okay.
You're easy to convince, I have to say. That's good.
I never got worried about it. And I was explaining, actually, later on in the day, I had an opportunity where I was talking with a client, and I said, it's sort of like if you play video games and they have like cheats, like someone can tell you, well, this particular thing is going to happen at this level, and here's how you deal with it.
Okay.
Like, right? And it's usually something you never would have guessed. It's like, oh, I would have done that so differently. And I had this idea in my mind that it was like, this is like one of those times, something weird. It's uncomfortable. It's not the thing I wanted to happen this morning. I have a busy day. Now I have to deal with this too. And that's okay. Like, that's the way I looked at it. Like, okay, this thing's going to come up, and just remember that it's supposed to come up. You're going to go through it with no problem at all. And it's all part of the plan and part of the process.
Okay.
So it works. And what's funny is that everything worked out, and it turns out there really wasn't anything wrong, and I didn't even have to have anybody come out.
Oh, nice. That is good.
And it just all resolved itself.
Yeah. Well, that's where we want it to be. That's really good. That's the perfect kind of result.
Yeah. So but I think part of it is, and I'm not saying that I always have success in doing this, but sort of remembering that in those times when things aren't working properly, if we relax about it, there's less resistance, so things have to work out easier, I think, right?
Well, yeah, that's true. And I think that's why I like the way that they phrased it in the movie, what was it called? The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. Because at the end of the movie, they quoted a line that kept getting repeated a number of times during the movie, which is, everything will be all right in the end. And if it's not yet all right, it's not yet the end.
Yay! I love that movie. I forgot about it. I forgot about that saying too. That's great.
But it's the same thing, right? It's basically the same concept.
Well, I'm thinking about this morning, the story that we read about the artist in the Neville book, who said that the janitor in her school had lost his helper, and so he didn't do that part of the job. And when she came into her classroom, all the chairs were still on top of the desks, which meant she was going to have to take them all down.
Yep.
And that she, in her mind, started complaining or criticizing him that he wasn't doing his job properly. And as soon as she took the first chair down, it slipped and it smashed her foot.
Right.
And just thinking about how our resistance, our complaining, our criticizing something can, lead to an outcome that isn't the best outcome. So it's just
it's law of attraction, right? I mean, it's another example of how like attracts like. Whenever you're on a particular vibrational frequency, whenever you're attracting a certain kind of thing, you get other kinds of things that are just like it, because that's what you're focusing on. It's just, that's one thing leads to another.
Right. And so, when I find myself in a place where something's not working properly and I deal with it, I handle it with no resistance, it feels so good. I mean, I can't claim that I do that every time. I want to get to that place where that's my default, where I don't get resistant and I don't get upset about it or freaked out about it.
I mean, I can't say I've gotten to the point now where if I do get freaked out, I can instantly hear in my head, oh, you're getting freaked out about it again. I can actually hear it like, oh, geez, just stop. But I keep right on going, no, just stop.
Well, that's what you were saying this morning about when we get really upset about something and then we stop ourselves in our tracks with like, we're giving away our power.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
We recognize it. Look how much this person or this situation or whatever, look how much power it has over us. Like, ooh, like I don't like that at all. I think I've told you that before. I mean, I don't think anybody does, but the one thing when I recognize that I'm like sliding down into that victim energy place, ooh, just the recognition that that's where I'm going, it usually pops me right out of it because I just don't want to be there.
Yeah, or even if it doesn't pop me out of it, it gives me enough of a warning and enough of notification that, I may take some steps down that way, and I'm starting to feel some of the pain of it and say, okay, I give in. I'm going back up the stairs. Forget it. Just, forget what I said. Do over, mulligan, I just want to go down
mulligan. That's why this book is so awesome.
It is. Yeah, well, that's part of what we talked about in today's program this morning, and we're going to continue that conversation because we're going to be looking at chapter 5 here in the afternoon podcast. But before we do that, we've got to do our promos because we're now doing the promos early on in the podcast, and they're really just 2 of them. There's 3 of them really. It's the same ones we do every time, but we keep putting them out there because we really do want people to take action on these. This is the kind of inspired action we want you to take. And the first one, of course, is if you're not yet a subscriber, become a subscriber. And it's simple to do. If you're listening to us on your smartphone, you already have a subscribe button there. Just click it and you're done. If you're not sure how to do it, there are instructions on the homepage of our website at loatoday.net. And then also, once you're a subscriber, and this is for all of our subscribers, for all of our listeners, please keep posting out there about listening to loatoday.net every time that you listen, because it's really paying off. I was looking at the numbers, Cindie, for what we did in September compared to prior months, and we broke all kinds of records in September. For the first time, we had more than 10,000 plays in a month. We actually had over 12,000 plays in a month, so we blew through that particular record. Our previous high for number of unique listeners, a unique listener being a single listener could listen to 5 or 10 or 20 or 40 episodes or whatever. It's going to be a little different for everyone. The average listener is listening to 38 episodes. That's what happened in September. And the total number of unique listeners, the previous high was 251. That was last April. We blew through that one. Last month's new high is 332 unique listeners. So we're just really, really nice. That was a 50% increase over August, by the way.
So thank you, listeners.
Thank you, listeners. Absolutely. And I say all that to let everybody know your efforts at posting out there that you're listening to loatoday.net are really paying off. More and more people are finding out about how to get their daily dose of happy. So those are our 2 big messages. And then the third one, which we hoped we were going to try to implement today, but we'll have to kind of postpone it a little bit, is we do want to hear from people. I mean, right now, because of the issue with the live broadcast function, it's going to be a little bit difficult for you to be listening to the program and, then calling in on the phone number because you won't know where we are in the program because you can't hear the live broadcast right now. But we'll get that fixed pretty shortly. However, no matter how you want to contact us, even if you're just sending an email or contacting us through Twitter or Facebook or something like that, send us a message because, we'll share the fact that you shared the message with us. If you don't want us to tell everything, we won't. But we just love to hear from people and get their perspective on what we're talking about and so forth and get some feedback. Are we talking about the stuff you want to talk about? Are we talking about the stuff that you want to hear about? Is there a particular topic that you would like us to go after that we haven't done so far? That's the kind of stuff we love to hear.
I like that idea. And also, if you have a particular situation that you're dealing with that you'd like, some input on how to use the law of attraction with your situation, that would be a great thing for you to let us know as well. I mean, we won't use your name or whatever if you don't want us to, but we'd love to answer those kind of questions because I love having lots of different input. You know, I am a coach, but I also have my own coaches and my own colleagues that are very LOA savvy. And when I'm working with something, I mean, I'll bring it up on the podcast, or I talk to Walt about it, or I talk to my colleagues about it, or other coaches about it.
Yeah.
And it's so great that everyone has different things to add to the equation.
Isn't
and
it?
Usually there will always be one or two things that are like, oh my goodness, that's it. As a matter of fact, I just got off the phone with somebody that said, oh, why didn't I think of that? Like, I know this stuff. And I said, well, that's why we have each other. So that,
right.
So that when we forget, right? Cause we do it all the time.
Oh, yeah. But you're right. You're absolutely right. Having that other perspective, particularly if you're trying to wrestle with something, or there's something you can't seem to work your way through it. You get that other perspective. It's like, oh, duh. Why didn't I think of that? That's so easy. But it's easy once it's explained to you. When you're in the middle of it, you just can't remember that one thing that you're trying to remember, and you just can't. It's like you're spinning your wheels. You're not going anywhere, you know?
Right. It's easy when it's not you.
Right. Oh, it's terribly easy when it's not you.
I always talked about this even outside of law of attraction. Like, I studied nutritional healing for many, many years. And so a lot of people will call me when they've got some kind of, symptom or something going on. And it's like, what do you do for this? I always know, like, that I have a lot of remedies in my head for things. And then when it's me, I can't think of a single thing. I'm like, I have no idea what to do about this.
Yeah.
And so it's funny that way. But when we're in the middle of something, this is what's interesting. That scale, that emotional scale, that also correlates to an energy scale, with the bottom of it being victim mode.
Yeah.
And we work our way up. At the very top, this is appropriate for Neville. He uses so many Christian scriptures. At the very top level, like level 7 energy, I always call that Jesus energy, because I joke that when we're there, we could walk on water. We could do anything. We can create anything we want at that level. And most of us don't tap into that level all that often, but it is the level of creation. And it's often the level that artists and musicians are in when they're creating. It's sort of like, you're a musician. So, when you write a piece of music, it sort of like feels like, where did that come from?
Oh, yeah.
Like I make a painting or I write a song, and it's like, it always feels like a miracle to me. Like, where in the world do these ideas come from that I feel like they're flowing through me? So that level of creation, it's way up there. But usually when we're sick or we have a problem, we're not way up there. We're down in the lower levels of those things. And so it's hard to see remedies and solutions and answers and creative ideas when we're way down in the dumps. And so I think that's why sometimes it's so much easier for someone else that's not in our same situation. They may be in a situation of their own, but they're not in the one we're in. So they go, oh, just use this tool. This will work.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned doing, writing music, creating songs and so forth, because I haven't actually written anything in decades. But when I was writing songs, I was also very depressed. And you can hear it in the songs. I mean, the whole blues modality it comes out of times are hard and so forth, but it tries to tie in a happy tone to it. So the blues is usually kind of an upbeat kind of a sound, but the basic concept is it came from I'm in a bad place. Well, my songs didn't have that quality. My songs weren't like the blues. They were just depressing followed by depressed. So they really didn't work out very well as songs. But
I was going to say, well, that's the rhythm part of rhythm and blues. The rhythm part's the happy part. The blues part's just the sad part, right?
Yeah. I shouldn't call it rhythm and blues. I should call it rhythm and depressed, because that's what it was.
I imagine that even when we're writing sad songs, they're helping us in some way, because we're expressing an emotion that we have. And, we talk about this a lot, but I always want to be careful not to judge certain emotions as bad, because I think that happens a lot in law of attraction circles. It's obvious that we all want to be happy and that we want to seek happiness and create our own happiness as much as we possibly can. But we also are going to have other emotions, because that's how we're made. And so I'm always careful not to judge them as being bad. It's no fun to be there. But they're all valid. They're all giving us some kind of information.
Oh, yeah. I was definitely getting information from the emotions I was putting into my songs. I didn't know what to do with that information at the time. But later on, when I started discovering law of attraction, and my wife had kind of a sit down with me saying, hey, everything coming out of your mouth is negative and all that kind of stuff. Then those songs that I wrote started to make more sense to me. Like, oh, yeah, I was expressing just how down I was when I wrote those songs. And no wonder they were so bad.
I'm raising my hand over here because I've definitely found, notebooks in my piano bench that had songs that I've written from decades ago and went, oh, wow.
Yeah.
I was really struggling.
I was not in a good place when I wrote that one. Boy, oh boy.
But so one of the things that we've been talking about in the last few days with Neville is the idea that, because right now we're talking about like looking back, into the past. And we've been talking about the idea that time is not linear
mm-hmm.
and that everything is happening at once and that we actually can revise the past by reimagining the memories that we have. Ooh, wow.
A funny thing that's been happening too, not just with these conversations, these have also been reinforcing it, but I'm finding over time, primarily through doing the podcast with you and the other co-hosts, as we talk about things like time standing still, time being not something that actually is moving, but from a non-physical perspective, it's just it all happens at one time, and you can just kind of see the whole flow of it. The idea of being able to change the past, change the way that the past happened, so that you, at the very least, you remember it differently, and ultimately, you can even make changes to what the past actually was. You can modify it. When you start first talking about that stuff, it sounds like absolute nonsense to you, to me. I mean, it certainly sounds like nonsense to me. Funny thing is, and I guess this ties into what Abraham talks about when they say that a belief is a thought you think over and over again. I've gotten to the point now where it starts to make sense to me. Not completely, don't get me wrong, but this idea that time is just it's not something that is fixed as a definite progression of events, and the events are locked in and fate and you have no control and all that. Well, I'm now actually throwing that out the window one little bit at a time. I'm realizing that what the quantum physicists are saying is correct. Like, oh my God, I'm making the transition in my mind. Wow.
Well, it was so funny. I was thinking this morning about the idea of going back and reimagining something in a different way. And I thought of, okay, so just a random example. I'm like, let's say you got into a car accident and you had a big dent in your car.
Mm.
And I started laughing because my thought was, okay, so every night as I was falling asleep, if I were to start thinking that it happened differently, in my memory, I mean, and I'm totally fabricating this because I haven't been in an accident. So,
good.
But I was just trying to think of a physical thing that would happen that you would want to change, right? So I was like, okay, if you were every night, instead of that memory that someone may have of like screeching brakes and crash, I live on a corner, so, there's occasionally a car wreck here.
Yeah.
I thought, what if you imagined as slamming on the brakes and, whew, my car stopped in time.
Yes.
Oh, I'm so glad that didn't happen. And so I thought, okay, so if you just kept applying that and kept applying it, would a miracle actually happen and your car would like suddenly be normal? And then I thought, and if that happened, no one would notice. You wouldn't notice because you would like rewound time to where the thing never happened. So we wouldn't even really be able to celebrate the miracle of it because it would just be like never happened.
That's an interesting conundrum right there. Because if it never really happened, how do you know that it happened?
Right. And so then I started thinking, because I think I'm thinking too much, right? Then I started thinking, so how many things have I actually changed using these methods? And I'll just never know because
they
never
changed,
happened
right?
Now.
Okay, now you got me wondering about the auto accident that happened before my wife and I got married, and that ended up paying for the wedding. I wonder if actually it originally was different.
It's so funny to think all of these things that we relegate them all to science fiction. Time travel and the like.
Oh, right.
But if it's true that we can really go back and reimagine things and that will have an effect, I don't think most of the effects that we notice are going to be quite that dramatic, but maybe it's just because the dramatic ones, everything's changed so much we don't recognize it. I don't know. You know,
I think
whole
that's
idea
it.
of,
I mean, how would you know? I mean, if the idea is that you've changed your mind and changed your belief, then the old belief, the old thinking is gone. How do you get it back?
I don't know.
I don't think you can. You'd have to reinvent it, you know?
Maybe Neville will address it. We'll just have to keep.
Well, let's find out. Maybe he's got something in here that'll give us a clue. So why don't we do chapter 5 and see what we got?
So forewarning, like I have not looked at this chapter. I mean, I have read this whole book probably several times over the past decade.
Okay.
But recently, I have not read this particular chapter. And we know from the past chapters that we've done that Neville likes to throw in quotes from Blake and different people, different poets, philosophers, Hermes. He throws in lots of scripture, and sometimes we have to sort of decode it. And I don't have a Neville decoder ring on, so we'll have to just see what happens. But
where do you order one?
Chapter. We're in the.
That's what I want to know. Where do you order your Neville decoder ring? I want to get one.
I need a Neville decoder ring. Maybe we should make one.
Hey, that's an idea. We could sell it.
Yeah. So we're reading the book Awakened Imagination. This is actually the first Neville book I ever read.
Oh, it is?
Way back in, I think it was like 2005, maybe?
Wow.
And this is chapter 5 called The Coin of Heaven.
Okay.
Does a firm persuasion that a thing is so make it so?
That's what we were just talking about, actually.
Right? I know, that's funny. So this one sentence, I'm like, oh wow, we could just talk the whole podcast on this one.
Probably
sentence.
could, yes.
Because this is the thing that Neville and Florence Scovel Shinn and Wallace Wattles and Abraham Hicks, this is sort of the thing we're always hearing.
Yeah.
Are we firmly persuaded? Do we believe it, even though our eyes don't see it yet? So
I mean, every time that we've done a podcast, I've done it from the same room, and I have had this same computer monitor in front of me, and I can see the same door over to the side, and I can see the same calendar on the wall, and that's what I remember every single time. And now you got me wondering, was that there every time? That's a little spooky.
I don't know. I mean, and then there's the whole idea of, you know, like string theory and the multiverse and, you know, parallel universes. I mean, it gets really crazy. So when I think about
gets real crazy? It starts real crazy. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you're right. So when I think of those things, I just say, well, then I guess yes.
I guess. Yeah.
If every possibility is actually in reality happening and it's all happening at once, then all I have to do is be firmly persuaded about it because it's already there.
Yeah.
So it says, and the prophet replied, all poets believe. Now this is from Blake, Marriage of Heaven and Hell.
Okay.
So does a firm persuasion that a thing is so make it so? And the prophet replied, all poets believe that it does. And in ages of imagination, this firm persuasion removed mountains. But many are not capable of a firm persuasion of anything.
Well, that's really depressing.
I think it's really true.
I mean, not capable? I mean, maybe not. If he had said that they hadn't developed it, I'd say, okay, that's great. But I agree with you. I think capable is a fluid term right here. Okay.
Because in other words, am I capable of running a marathon today? No. I'm just going to say no. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that I don't have the potential to run a marathon capably? I think I have the potential.
Absolutely.
But I'd have to train for it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to figure out what that training looks like and probably have to hire a coach, and I'd have to get in shape, better shape than I'm in now. That's for sure. And I'd have to start practicing how to run, right? And all of those things. So I look at it sort of that way, that right now in the present moment, I believe this is true. There are many people that are not capable of having a firm persuasion of anything. I'm talking about from a law of attraction perspective.
Mm-hmm. And
I
in
know
this moment is the right words, I think, because the moment can change and our perspective can change moment by moment. But at this particular moment in time, there are a number of people, a lot of people who are in a place where they don't believe they're capable of persuading themselves about anything, and so they're not.
Well, they're not, and they haven't developed the mental muscles and the imagination to actually hold that vision for the length of, time.
Right.
Now we're talking about time, but
Which
hold the
doesn't
vision
exist.
to see it happen. A firm persuasion. And then then he uses the scripture from Romans that says, let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. So then we've got the idea of being fully persuaded, and up here, a firm persuasion.
And he defines persuasion next, actually. In the next sentence, he defines what he means by persuasion.
Yeah, persuasion is an inner effort of intense attention.
Yeah.
And I love this, to listen attentively as though you heard is to evoke, to activate.
Yeah.
By listening, you can hear what you want to hear and persuade those beyond the range of the outer ear. Speak it inwardly in your imagination only. Make your inner conversation match your fulfilled desire. What you desire to hear without, you must hear within. Embrace the without within and become one who hears only that which implies the fulfillment of his desire, and all the external happenings in the world will become a bridge leading to the objective realization of your desire.
Okay, now he's definitely in rabbit hole territory here. But go ahead. Continue.
Well, this is one of my favorite lines from Neville ever, and it's that your inner speech is perpetually written all around you in happenings. And that's one of the things that I tell myself, I tell clients, we talk about this, is if you want to know what you believe, just look around. Look at your calendar. Look at your environment.
Yeah.
Look at your bank account.
Yeah.
Look at what is your inner speech is perpetually written all around you in happenings.
And that line actually does a nice job of explaining the previous paragraph, because that previous paragraph, it began with that, embrace the without within. And I'm saying, what? But when he says your inner speech is perpetually written all around you in happenings, okay, now I start to get it. Now I see what he's saying, that what we think about inside is what we see outside. Law of attraction. Okay, I get that.
And I love that he uses the term inner speech, because I think that many of us have a conversation going on in our head a lot of the time.
Yeah, I call it
self-talk,
really. Yeah.
Yeah, self-talk. Right. Your self-talk is perpetually written all around you in happenings. So learn to relate these happenings to your inner speech, and you will become self-taught.
It's a funny thing, too. If all this is true, and I think it is true, that our inner self-talk is what determines our outer surroundings, then very clearly, changing the inner self-talk in substantial ways will substantially change the outer surroundings. So why is it that we have so much trouble believing that? I mean, it's not like this is what if this was something that was easy for us to buy into and believe, we would already be believing it. We wouldn't have to be doing a podcast on it. The rest of the world wouldn't be struggling with, I am a victim of what's going on in my outside circumstances. And yet, that's what the rest of the world is doing. And that's what we do sometimes, too. We still get trapped in that. So how is it that we just don't make the connection? I don't get it.
I think it's because we don't practice.
I guess.
We depend on the happenings that are outside of us.
Yeah.
To inform us of what's real, instead of recognizing that we can decide what's real and make it so by what we're focusing on. I mean, it doesn't happen in an instant, because most of us don't have the ability at this point, or the capability, to be that firmly persuaded in an instant.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to learn it, and it takes effort to learn it. That's what I have definitely learned for myself. I have to spend sometimes a lot of effort learning it. Not physical effort. Well, sometimes there's a physical effort involved, but it's more of a mental effort. It's what he called that inner effort of intense attention. And
Yeah.
I would say, I would even extend that sentence to say an inner effort of extended intense attention.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because using that word attention, there are a lot of things in the world right now that feel like miracles in their ability to compute, right? Technology. But also those things don't always lead us, they don't always support us in having the attention span to have an intense, focused attention on something for any length of time.
Right, yeah.
I mean, I see people, and I've seen this over and over for the past, I don't know, probably since my kids were teenagers, where you go to show someone a video or something, and it's like they look at it and say, oh, it's 3 minutes long? Like, I don't have time to look at that. Or
Yep.
I noticed that one of the publications I write for, they will have the reading time under the title. It'll say like 4 minutes to read, reading time 4 minutes. And I think that's really important because so many people look at the title and then they don't read the article because it's like, we don't have time. And here's the thing. I think sometimes we really don't have time to do whatever it is at that moment because we're on our way to do something else. But what I think happens when we're always taking everything in little sound bites and snapshots is that we actually train our attention to have a small attention span.
Oh, yeah. And we've been aware of this for some time, actually. In fact, wasn't there a cable television show here in the U.S. early on in the history of cable called Short Attention Span Theater?
Oh, I don't remember that. Tell me about it.
I don't remember a lot about it. I think what they used to do is take like clips from like current movies and so forth and show those clips. Or sometimes they'd show segments of like comedy acts or things like that. And the message that came through from it, it was designed to be funny. It was intended to be a funny program. Right. But the message was to show just how short our attention spans really were. And by even the standards of that time, today, the attention span is monumentally shorter. I mean, today's, literally, I was doing some promoting of the podcast using some paid advertising on Facebook. And do you know that Facebook recommends that if you do a video or an audio type of advertisement, you keep it no longer than 15 seconds?
Oh my goodness. I thought you were going to say like 60 seconds and I was still going to be a little surprised.
15 seconds. That apparently is the optimal attention span of the average Facebook user.
Oh my goodness. So then it's not a wonder that we don't have the attention span, naturally in the course of the way we live, right, to focus in and create manifestations the way we say we want to, right? It's like everyone in my experience anyway, I know I was really excited when I learned about the law of attraction. I mean, I wanted to just read everything I could read on the topic. Mm-hmm. I was so fired up about it and still am. I mean, that's, one of the reasons why I do this podcast with you, right? This stuff is exciting to me. And when I think about that, the miracles that we hear about, I mean, I call them miracles because I think they are. When I say I would like an owl and within 24 hours, a giant owl comes to my office window when I'm in the city,
in the middle
here
of the city,
on this busy
right.
corner.
Oh.
Those kind of things are miraculous.
Yeah.
And we would see, I think anyway, that we would see so much more if we would spend the time to cultivate our attention like Neville is asking us to.
I think so. And in fact, I'll go a step further and say maybe what we're identifying about the average attention span of a Facebook user, for instance, 15 seconds, it kind of reminds me of what I think it was Louis D'Souza who does the Monday Morning podcast with me. I think he's the one who told me that it's either him or Tom Wells. I can't remember which one. One of them told me that the time that Abraham gives for how long it takes for something to start to manifest has shrunk over the years from 17 seconds to 14 seconds. It used to be they said it was 17 seconds, and now it's 14 seconds. And apparently the reason for that is more and more people are kind of getting up to vibrational speed, so the amount of time that it takes, the amount of resistance they've got built up, on average has shrunk. But it also makes me think you've got the 15-second attention span on Facebook. So here's what's going on. We have a multitude of people who are just flipping from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. They're not spending any time on any of them. They're not giving it their intense attention in any stretch of the imagination. And I've kind of done that myself sometimes. I think I know what's going on here. When I'm doing it, I find that I'm usually looking for something to make me feel entertained, to make me feel better about whatever's going on in life. I'm looking for Facebook to give me a way to feel better. And I try this one for a few seconds. Nope. Go on to the next one. Nope. Go on to the next one. Nope. Go on to the next. That's the
Sudbury School approach to social media.
Kinda. Yeah. Yeah. That's really what it is. And so now it starts to make sense to me. Why is it that we have so much trouble believing? Because we keep training ourselves to believe that, nope, that's not going to be it. Nope, that's not going to be it. Nope, that's not going to be it. Nope, that's not going to be it.
That's another facet in there. Wow.
Yeah.
So we're actually training our attention span to be very short and to not really be so expectant that the next thing's going to be the right thing. Next.
And then we wonder why it is we don't have any expectation that it's going to work.
Well, okay. So I remember hearing when I first learned about Abraham Hicks, because I actually don't think that Abraham Hicks was my first foray into law of attraction. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of interesting to me now because it's their books, their message, their media presence has gotten so huge that I think they are most people's first foray at this point. But I remember hearing that 17-second thing. Mm-hmm. I had not heard that it had gotten shorter.
I hadn't either. No, that was news.
But tell me a little bit more about that. In other words, what is supposed to begin at 17 seconds? If I can hold the vision of a thing for 17 seconds, where am I in the process?
What's supposed to happen is I've heard it and have had it explained to me by some of the other co-hosts is that after you focus on something for 17 seconds, the law of attraction must deliver at least some other thought to you that is a mirror or a reflection or a similar vibration to what it is you were focusing on. So you get the next idea in the segment or in the process, so to speak. And if the 64-second, that's like, 4 of those in a row, that's where you start actually manifesting a physical manifestation. That's the way it was explained to me.
Okay. So I know that there's that idea that thoughts create more thoughts just like them, right?
Right.
Okay. This is interesting because I'm trying to tie this in. I think it ties in quite nicely to what we're talking about here with Neville saying, look, I feel like Neville's saying, look, you need to be able to focus your attention in an intense way. Mm-hmm. And so the way this works is that if we can at least just hold that thought for 17 seconds or maybe 14 seconds, then another thought that aligns with it will appear. And if we can hold on to 34 seconds or 28 seconds, whatever, then another thought will appear. And if we can keep going,
yes,
then those thoughts are going to gain momentum. We talk about momentum a lot.
And you were talking this morning about how when we're imagining, we want to let the imagination come to us.
Yes.
Well, that's part of that time process, isn't it? Because the more that you stick to the intense attention for, we'll do it in 14-second increments, for 14 seconds, 28 seconds, 42 seconds, each increment along the way, you're not doing anything specific about trying to create anything. You're just giving your attention, and you're allowing the imagination to build off of that attention. You see what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Because that's the point where, and I want to point out too something that I don't know if Abraham Hicks would say this, although knowing their story and how their whole process and everything they talk about now actually started with them deciding they were going to learn how to meditate. Yes.
Right. Exactly.
And that's the story that they tell. Oh, this meditation thing. How do we do it? We sit here and we shut our eyes and get quiet and we relax.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Neville's saying. He's saying to put yourself into a state, that he says is almost like you're going to go to sleep. So in other words, relax yourself completely. And at that point, when you're relaxed and you're holding the vision for however long, let's just say 17 seconds, and the thoughts start coming. You're not chasing them. You're not trying to create them. They come to you.
Mm-hmm.
And come to you again when you hold them long enough to where they start to create or attract. I don't know what they do. They attract another thought that's like the thought you just had, that supports it, that's in the same vein.
Right.
And so, like, we've talked a bit about this idea of revising the past. We're talking about using the imagination to create something else or something different, something new. And in my experience, that has been the thing that has worked. Like, sometimes I've actually been surprised at what's shown up in my imagination. Surprised at the thought that might come in when I'm determining that I want a certain outcome, and I'm going to do this process of assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And I start to think about what it would be like to have that thing I'm thinking about. A lot of times, suddenly, as I'm holding those thoughts in meditation, some idea will pop in that I hadn't even thought of. And I know then, okay, I think I'm glimpsing something that's in the future. But I'm tapping into it now because time is not linear.
Okay. Well, then let me take it from a different angle and see if we can combine them together. Because if I'm thinking about it in terms of this intense attention,
yes,
giving intense attention. Try that one 3 times fast.
Hard to say.
Yeah, right. The intense attention is necessary. It's necessary to be intense so that your mind isn't, wandering to other stuff. But by the same token, since we're waiting for it to come to us rather than trying to create it or invent it deliberately through our physical process, our physical mental process, we're trying to maintain intense attention while not trying to deliberately create thoughts out of thin air. Right? So we're in a waiting mode, but we're also in a blocking mode in the sense that we're not allowing anything else in except for the one thing we're focusing on. That's a very fine balance right there. That's that's a pretty difficult balance in some ways, because the first thing that happens that when we're meditating, let's describe this as meditating, because that's pretty much what it is. The first thing that happens is we start to meditate, and then the dog distracts us. And then the radio distracts us. And then the fact that there's a little breeze distracts us. And the lights on that distract us. And all this stuff is distracting us. So we're intensely trying to bring it back. But we're not trying to bring it back so far that we're going to start creating it, because that's our way to block out the rest of it. That's what I'm saying. That we're not, we want to make sure that the intensity is not being used to try to physically create it in our minds. Instead, we want to use the intensity to allow stuff to come. That's a different art form entirely.
It is different. And sometimes when I'm explaining this to people, I feel like it's a difficult thing to explain. Like, it's an easy thing to say, but I'm unsure of, like, am I really explaining this well enough where someone gets it? But I'm telling you that once you've experienced it, you completely will never misunderstand it again.
Because I do have the tendency to try to invent. I mean, when I'm doing my intense attention, my tendency is to try to come up with an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, this is almost a new way of doing a meditation or doing a focus of attention, because I'm going to try to intently focus, but not consciously create something, not consciously put it together.
Right. And this is why I think it's helpful to tap into our 5 senses. Because we can come up with an outcome we'd like, and we can imagine a scenario. We can imagine what it would feel like, and those thoughts just start coming, and those ideas just start coming. So one of the things, if we're wanting to point our focus somewhere, we can focus on our five senses and what they would be experiencing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess so, because when we're getting that sensory input, so to speak, or that imagined sensory input, it's not like there's a certain degree to which we're consciously putting it together, right? We're taking this input and we're like stringing it together. We're saying, okay, we're going to put this next to that one, and that's next to that one, and so on and so forth. So we're creating like a time sequence, so to speak. But that's about the extent to which we're actively creating it. The creation, for the most part, is that these little thoughts and ideas and feelings and senses and smells and tastes and touches and all that kind of thing are just kind of coming to us, and we're just putting them in sequence.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is that when we start focusing, we can point our focus on those things, but then other things will come to us in our imagination. And that's when I think we know that we're in that creative zone with it. It's very cool to have happen.
Well, you're making me want to practice it some more now.
Yeah, and we're not having to, like you said, it's not this really strenuous mental process where I have to like create this big imagined story. I think about at the beginning of the year when I had the aha about pivoting, and I said that, I would start this story in my head about, oh my goodness, I feel like I'm getting a sore throat and my nose feels like it's getting clogged up and I think my head hurts and maybe I have a fever and, go down that trip. And I would say, no, what do I really want? I don't want to feel like this. I want to feel better. And I didn't feel good. So it was hard to come up with a big story about how I wanted to feel. So I just focused on a couple things. Mm-hmm. I want to wake up full of energy and feeling great and be ready to do the podcast and for my voice to be in really good shape. And I would just think those things over and over. And then suddenly another thing would pop into my head. And so I started somewhere, yes. But my focus was on those few things until my imagination took over on its own, which it can. That's the creative function.
So this raises an interesting question. Is there a physical location, or not physical? Is there a definite location for the imagination? And if so, is the imagination originating from what we call our inner being?
I don't know how to answer that question. I have to think about that.
Okay.
I want to say yes.
I tend to say yes too, because there seem to be like two options here. There's either the inner being or there's my physical conscious mind that's originating it. And we're saying here, nope, the original the conscious mind needs to just relax and let stuff come. Well, where's it going to come from? Inner being. There aren't a whole lot of options left, really.
Right. Exactly. It's a mystery. Well, let's see what we can get from Neville in this little bit of time we have left in this chapter.
You realize we're doing the same thing that we used to do with Money and the Law of Attraction by Jerry Hicks. We're mincemeating this thing, but it's really interesting mincemeat.
Well, I feel like there's so much here that personally, I think it's best that way. Like, this is one of those books. It's very small. If you manage to buy like a paperback copy of this book, it won't be very big. Mm. It's really small. I mean, it's 8 chapters or something and they're short, right? So you buy it, and it's one of these books, for me anyway, where I remember I had another book that was about the same size. I took it to the beach. I was like, oh, this will be I'll finish this in an hour and a half. And then it was like this, and I would read like 3 paragraphs and I would have to get up and walk down the beach and think about it. Took me forever to get through it because it's dense material. So I like the way we're kind of chopping it up.
Okay. Well, if that works, that's great. But like you said, let's see what's in the book. Maybe some of the questions we're asking here will get answered.
So learn to relate these happenings to your inner speech, and you will become self-taught. That's where we left off.
Right.
By inner speech is meant those mental conversations which you carry on with yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They may be inaudible, or maybe not. Just joking. Does anyone else out there work alone and talk to themselves? They may be inaudible when you are awake, because of the noise and distractions of the outer world of becoming, but they are quite audible in deep meditation and dream. But whether they be audible or inaudible, you are their author and fashion your world in their likeness. Okay, now we're going to get into some scripture verses, so let's see where he goes.
I'll have to do some translating then.
Put your decoder ring on.
Yeah, right.
There is a God in heaven, and heaven is within you, that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and thy visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. Okay, so he's using that as an example. And he talks about this often, that many of the prophets would receive messages about the future in dreams. Inner speech from premises of fulfilled desire is the way to create an intelligible world for yourself. Now, isn't this going right back to assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled?
It sounds like it, yeah.
Inner speech, so your self-talk, that comes from the premise of fulfilled desire. Not desire. Fulfilled desire. Mm-hmm. Is the way to create an intelligible world for yourself. Observe your inner speech, for it is the cause of future action. Inner speech reveals the state of consciousness from which you view the world. Make your inner speech match your fulfilled desire, for your inner speech is manifested all around you in happenings. If any man offend not in word, we're going to the Bible with this one, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. Behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. Behold also the ships, which though they be so great, and are driven by fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Even so the tongue is a little member, and boasts great things. Behold how great a matter a little fire kindles. The whole manifested world goes to show us what use we have made of the word, inner speech. An uncritical observation of our inner talking will reveal to us the ideas from which we view the world. Now that reminds me of, did we talk about yesterday? We did. The idea that we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are.
Yes.
Right?
Well,
so,
at least we hypothesized that. I'm not sure how much we convinced ourselves of it, but we believed it.
Oh, I believe it.
You do? Okay.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, that's been one of my favorite, verses forever, because it's very, very true. We can see this today, in many different layers. I don't want to just talk about politics, but when we talk to somebody and they tell us how they see the world, they're not seeing the world as it is. They're seeing the world as they are.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it reminds me of when we were going through the Abraham Hicks book, Money and the Law of Attraction. It talked about the old money story. It talked about when people say, well, nobody's getting a job right now in this economy. And that's really the way they see the world. But it's because that's what their inner talking is doing. You could talk to someone else that says, well, I've had 5 jobs in the last 6 months and I keep getting better jobs and better jobs. It's not been a problem for me at all.
It's actually a very sobering thing for me, because as I look back on my early life, I mean, when I got out of college, I got out in the midst of the great inflationary depression that started in 1979, 1980. And when it really, the popular idea was there aren't any jobs around, and I bought into it. And so there weren't any jobs around. And I'm thinking to myself, my God, I was sabotaging myself from the moment I got out of college. Oh,
right? Well, I mean, that's the question you can always ask yourself or someone else whenever we're feeling like, hopeless, or like things just aren't working, and we say, well, this, will never work. I always like to say, well, has anyone ever done it? I asked somebody that this weekend that's, just starting college, and they said, well, I really would like to do this specific thing, but you can't do this and live in this part of the country. And I said, has anyone ever done it? And I was like, Oh, well, yeah. I told that story before about the person that told me, well, I'll never be able to get a job doing this thing because I don't have any college. And I said, well, here's your homework. I want you to go find 3 people that have been hugely successful in that field that don't have a college degree. And she did it. And she came back with a different story. Suddenly she was seeing the world from a place of, I can do this.
That's really cool. I mean,
so
she made the
what
turnaround
she was
that
seeing
quickly.
the world before is who she is from her place, right? Mm-hmm. We see our inner talking informs the whole thing that we see. And so when we can change that inner talking, the whole manifested world will show us what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
It's cool and it's sobering and it's also exciting. It's all of them all wrapped up into one thing. Because over time, we realize that the old ideas that we had just don't work after a while. Actually, they never really did work. But they actually often would work to our detriment. Like the idea that, well, there are no jobs available, right? That when I graduated from college, there were no jobs available. So I bought into the idea that there were no jobs available. And guess what? There were no jobs available for me.
Right.
Looking back on it now and realizing that all I had to do was adopt the idea that there were plenty of jobs available and I would have gotten a job. And as I look back, I realized I didn't get a job until I believed that there was going to be a job available.
It's amazing.
Which is sobering. It's like, oh my goodness. Wow. What did I do to myself? So
Neville says this is a good, I like this to wind us up today.
Okay.
Inner talking mirrors our imagination.
Mm.
And our imagination mirrors the state with which it is fused. We talked about states earlier.
Right.
In the week. If the state with which we are fused is the cause of the phenomena of our life, then we're relieved of the burden of wondering what to do, for we have no alternative but to identify ourselves with our aim. And inasmuch as the state with which we are identified mirrors itself in our inner speech, then to change the state with which we are fused, we must first change our inner talking. So see, it all starts with the story that we're telling ourselves about ourselves. And I love this here. It's our inner conversation which makes tomorrow's facts.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then he quotes a scripture that reminds me of what you just said. He says, put off the former conversation, the old man, which is corrupt, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind. Put on the new man, which is created in righteousness. And I think when we think about just tell a different story.
Yes.
Put that old story away,
mm-hmm.
and that old identity that told that story with it. Just, you weren't making the mark. You weren't hitting the mark with that one, right? It's not what you wanted. So just let it go and aim for the mark again with a new story and step into the identity of the person that already has that thing.
And I can think of a perfect example that illustrates both the corrupt version, as he calls it, and the new man version of it, right from a topic that I bring up all the time. That's the podcast. When I was first doing the podcast, I said to myself, I don't have any listeners. And so for a long time, I had very, very few listeners. And I believed that I was going to have no listeners. Who would want to listen to me talking about this stuff? And then one day, I don't know why it changed, but somehow I just decided that I wanted more listeners, and I started getting more listeners. And that's just amazing. I mean, that is literally what we're talking about. What was my inner conversation became tomorrow's facts.
Yes. And the story that we're telling now, that we're seeing come true and turn into fact every day, is that every day we have more and more listeners.
And it's true, because I can see the growth curve. I mean, I make a little chart of it showing me the curve, and the curve is like whoop, straight up. I mean, there was a little glitch in the spring where it kind of fell into like this crevice for a while, but then it recovered and it's right back on where the path of the old curve was. All because we kept changing our belief about what's going to happen. Wow.
Right. Making it bigger and better.
Well, obviously Neville did have a good handle on this. He expresses it differently from what Abraham or even Tony Robbins or any of the other people that we know the way they express it today. But he has a good handle on it, so I'm glad we're doing this book. Let's continue doing it next week. Does that sound good to you?
That sounds great to me. I will be back next week.
So we'll pick up on, I guess I don't know if we have more in Chapter 5 to do, but if we don't, then we'll just go on to Chapter 6. So we'll pick that up. And we hope we'll do that. And we hope that you'll join us next time as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.